All right, welcome back to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I believe this is episode 23 of season 2. Yes, I believe it is episode 23. I'm not messing up this time, but just in case I did, 23, 24. But just welcome back, everybody. I'm excited for today's episode. First and foremost, I want to give my thanks and gratitude to all you guys who support me, recommending people, recommending topics, supporting the coffee and conversation, and all the work that I do. But most importantly, I want to give a special thanks to all the people who have been on season 1 and season 2. Truly could not do this without you guys. You have been able to help this platform thrive and grow through sharing your own life experiences. So thank you for that. Those who may be passing through and coming across this podcast and just don't know who I am, my name is Michael D. Davis Samas. I am 25 years old. I spent a little bit over 11 years in the Michigan child welfare system. Started advocating at age 15. I have 10 years plus and working in child welfare, doing everything from advocating nationally and statewide, doing policy and programming, working in corrections on the juvenile facilities, to working in congregate care as a youth care worker, sitting on over 15 different boards. And I am currently continuing my education and pursuing obtaining a doctorate on a slow slope, because education is hard. But that's a little bit about me. I'm glad that you're here. But more importantly, we're here to highlight the guests that I have on today. So if you guys don't mind, and if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Michael, soon we'll be able to call you Dr. Michael, though, right? Which is even maybe more important. I'll be excited for that day, Michael. I'm going to encourage you on that. Super honored and privileged to be here, Michael. I'm Shenandoah Chefalo. I am also a kiddo who aged out of the Michigan foster care system long before Michael aged out of the foster care system. There was me. I am much older than 25, but we don't have to, right, Michael? I don't have to disclose, right? I get to choose my...
You're perfectly fine.
I get to choose my own disclosures. So I'm much older than Michael, but I aged out. I entered foster care multiple times, entered in at 13, ultimately aged out into homelessness at 15, and then decided that I'd keep my story a secret for a really long time until the work I was doing led me to share my story. I was working as a law office administrator. I had been doing that work for about 17 years, primarily working in criminal defense offices, and sort of began asking myself how we could reform criminal justice, and was really a strong advocate in the criminal justice world when I came to realize that about 95% of our clients had been in child welfare. And sort of through the strength of my clients who really said, you need to share your story so there's not people like me, right? That's how my clients, they weren't in a position to share their story. So in 2016, 5 years after I started, I released my first book, Garbage Bag Suitcase, with the idea that we would change the way in which we saw, child welfare. And that book actually led me to realizing that there was something even before child welfare, which was the trauma-informed circle. And how do we actually heal whole families? How do we heal ourselves? And so I'm really fortunate now that for the last 10 or 15 years or so, I've been able to work in systems, building trauma-informed frameworks in order to not only heal, but to prevent re-traumatization that we all know happens so frequently, not just in child welfare, but in school systems, in medical systems, in government systems, in human services of all different kinds. And so I'm fortunate that I get to help organizations and systems build those to heal their staff, to heal the people that they're working with, and to prevent re-traumatization. So super excited that you asked me to be here today, Michael.
Awesome. Something really struck my brain, and it's really funny how our clients, get us in these, get us in these predicaments where, like, I guess I go out there and share. Because I remember, a time when I started out sharing my story at 15, but I remember a time when I took a seat back and I was like, let me re-examine where my life is going, and I was like, maybe it's not me sharing my story, maybe it's not, that helped me heal from so
Mm,
much of my own trauma, and maybe that was what it was for. So remember taking a seat back in, like, my early adulthood, and it was crazy how I started finding my way to working with people and working with friends and different things like that. And it's just like life was like, no, your story is meant to be heard, and even if it's not specifically your story, moments of your story are meant
mhm.
to help other people, in that way. So I just thought it's really crazy how that happens. Um,
Yeah, because I think, like, for me, right? So also different times, like how we each came up in the system and what was sort of going on in the world and how we viewed that. For me, there was so much pain attached to my story and so many myths attached to my story, right? So
mhm,
I spent a lot of my years between 13 and 18 being asked, well, what'd you do wrong to be in foster care?
mm,
Uh, if your parents can't love you, who can love you? Like, are you worthy of love? Um, things that were really attached to the myths of why kids were in care in the first place. I'm not sure that we're over all of those myths yet. I know you would
no,
agree
definitely
that
not.
that 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 many of those myths still exist. Um, and like that was a lot of pain that I wasn't ready to deal with, right? Like developmentally, I was just trying to survive. Like I was trying to figure out where my next meal was coming from. And so this idea of like healing not only from my birth parent trauma and then the trauma of the system, right? I sort of see my life in phases. I have family of origin trauma, and then I have systemic trauma from my foster care experience,
Mhm,
and then I have, of course, just living my own life that has caused trauma, right? My own
mhm,
decisions that I've made post 18 and things, often based on the things that have happened to me beforehand. That I thought no one needs to hear that,
mhm,
and I really lived the idea of fake it till you make it. Just
mm,
pretend. Just keep pretending and it will all work out. And what I came to really understand with my clients is first, I wasn't the only one because very much in my growing up, right? No social media. Like I didn't know other foster kids. I wasn't connected to them. We didn't have advocacy points as you talk about that, you got to start telling your story at 15. That wasn't something that we got to do. And so
mhm,
I felt very isolated. And it wasn't until talking with my clients, and I love your laughter about like our clients get us into these messes. It's like I,
mhm,
I often get just as much strength from them as I think they say they get from me, right? Like that
yeah,
is for me a two-way street. Being on a show like yours is like I get just as much strength from you and hearing you is that I hope your listeners will get from hearing us. It to me,
mhm,
it is a back and forth. And so when my client said, if you don't share your story, what about all the kids that we could save from being me? Like they need to know they're not alone. They need to know that there is another way through this. And that was the thing for me where it was like, wait, I'm actually being selfish by not doing this.
yeah,
That 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 there is a different way through and it doesn't have to be so painful and we don't have to be alone and we can talk about this. And so for me it was shining this light, and much like the women's movement, the Me Too movement, all of a sudden when I started shining the light there were people raising their hands saying, well, me too. Well, I was in foster, like, wait, we can talk about this, and and there's a space and I'm not alone, and there are people who are struggling in real life, who are faking it, who are trying to just get by. And I think there's some real strength in that of what I've been really impressed with is watching the younger generation of foster kids really coalescing us together and saying we're not going to allow this for yet another generation. Um, and it's inspiring to watch, and it's hopeful to me that that change is possible, because when you're in it, when you're working in it, you can lose the forest for the trees. I sometimes think, are we making any dents at all? I talk to other people who aged out, or who are my age, who've aged out, were like, it feels like nothing's changed. You know, we hear young kids sharing their stories, and eh, they're just in a new time period, right? Like those are our same stories. So has anything changed? But then I see a kid doing a podcast. I see someone, and I'm like, it has changed, because that wouldn't have been possible um before, and it is possible now. So you see those subtle changes that give you the energy to keep going.
Definitely, definitely. You dropped so many gems right there. Um, I think back, and I think back to navigating transitioning out. And when I aged out of the system, it felt to me, because I grew up with my brothers and sisters who were in the units with me, because most of my time was spent in congregate care. Like
Yep.
sometimes didn't see daylight, like it's just
Yeah.
all too real reality, and a lot of them did not make it.
Hmm.
And when aging out, there was this anger, there was this bitterness, there was this, like, how could you kind of feeling, because I stumbled with that for a while, on top of my institutionalization.
Hmm.
And you can probably, soak it all into the whole institutionalization. But I struggled with that for a little while, because society and the stigmas around it, you get it from people, then you get it from television, then you get it from books, where you were the root cause, you're a problem, or what have you. So when you said that, in your time, people weren't really too vocal about it, and people, when you start to, disclose your experience, and you know, who you were and what have you, um, it was kind of similar in my own right, and it felt as though, until I got to where I am now, just being
Hmm.
completely real with the audience, and you, when I disclosed when I first aged out, everyone looked at me as an issue,
Yeah. Or
as I
someone
could.
to save, which
Right,
wasn't a
right.
good feeling either.
Right, as I grew, and developed, okay, I didn't know how to tell my story in the best way. I'm a kid from Detroit, rough around the edges, got a few cussing
Yeah.
words in between what I'm probably sharing my story with, and stuff like that. As I grew and developed, and it looked a little bit more professional to where I am now. People are like, oh, yeah, that's Michael, and stuff like that. And there's still stigmas, more importantly, probably placed on me still
Hmm.
today. But the more important fact of it is that I've built um a kind of a roadblock between, stigma and fact,
Mm.
and trying to help educate people, because I'm one of a few that, go through the system and end up on both sides. I was on the juvenile side first, and then got to the foster care side,
Mhm.
so at some point in my life I had been labeled as a delinquent. But what I have to explain to people and share my story is that I was supposed to be in foster care a long time ago. It wasn't
Mhm.
until my body and my mind left this world for a little bit, mentally, because of the abuse that I endured. The
Mhm.
reactions that came out of that led me to the juvenile system, and we talk about trauma and how that induces so many different things. But for me, it was a side effect of the root cause.
Well, and I'm not sure about a side effect. I mean, there's so many great things in there, Michael, just listening to you, that resonate. And I think what's interesting is like people are like, what could a young Black man and an old white lady have in common, right?
Mhm.
On its outside. And what's really interesting about that is the use of the word stigma first, right? Because
Mhm.
ultimately, it's like, what's our bias around that? The stigma that comes to a young Black man who has been a juvenile delinquent versus an old white lady who's been a juvenile delinquent, right?
Yeah.
It's very different. It's a really interesting thing. And I talk about my time in congregate care really differently because I was the only white girl in congregate care.
Mm.
And so it was really Black women who saved me. It was Black women, Black girls at the time, now they're women, right? Were um, who showed me the path forward. But it's also when we talk about that equity, when we talk about that stigma, in the way that I understand my own privilege of that time. And I'll just give you an example. When we were on the units together, we didn't have easy access to feminine hygiene products. There was like a whole procedure you had to go through to get feminine hygiene products, right? Like you had to make a request. And when the Black girls on my unit would make the request, they wouldn't get the products.
You
When
got
I would make the
you had to make a
request,
request
you had to
to
make a
get.
request, right? So when I would make the request, we would get the products. Now, we didn't have the language of privilege and white privilege when we were 13 and 14 and 15.
Mhm.
That just didn't exist. But we knew what was going on. We knew that there was a difference in treatment that was happening. We just learned how to substep it to get our needs met, to survive.
Mhm.
But that's the thing, you learn these things to survive. So the behaviors that then you talk about that led to delinquency, right, are really, we look at a behavior and we think about trying to correct the behavior instead of, excuse me, understanding what the behavior is trying to tell us.
Mhm.
In other words, what's underneath the behavior? So we hear with foster kids all the time, oh, they lie all the time, right? I hear this from foster parents. How do I help? Like, but lying is a way to keep ourselves safe.
Mhm.
Fighting is a way to keep ourselves safe. Stealing is a way to keep ourselves safe. Well, how could that be? Because I need to eat. It
Mhm.
keeps me safe. It keeps me here. And that when we begin to see what sometimes appear as negative actions from really an unmet need, we see the whole thing differently. Now, people can say, well, listen, I can't just let kids keep stealing cars, or I can't let kids, right, just because they had a traumatic experience. Well, it's not either or, it's yes and. We can hold people responsible in trauma informed ways. But to do that, you have to see it as an unmet need first. And if
Mhm.
you see it that you're just going to punish someone out of behavior, and listen, as a kid on the unit, you're not. You won't punish a kid out of good behavior. I've watched people take severe action against kids trying to, deadly action against kids trying to get them to change their behavior. You won't. What you have to do is see the unmet need. And what is critical for me, what breaks my heart, is thinking about my own experience, thinking about your experience, thinking about the 500,000 kids who are having the experience today in America, is what's the unmet need that we're being distracted from because of a behavior we don't like, or that
Mhm.
we don't think is a good behavior, or it's a behavior we would like to see changed. And so we get distracted by the behavior instead of seeing the unmet need. And I think when I hear your story, I'm like, there was an unmet need for Michael. There was an unmet need for me. There was an unmet need for many of the women that were on my unit. And like you said, of those women, I know we're only a handful of them are today. And out of the handful that I know where they are today, there's only two of us that are still alive.
Mhm. Wow. Wow. And that's something that I speak about quite frequently on my podcast, identifying, or understanding that behavior is language,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, and not looking at behavior as like a consequence in a way, but really, trying to dive deeper, and I'm not a
Yeah,
psychologist, not a trade social worker or anything like that, but I've been around the block
but
a
you're an
few
expert.
times.
But you're an
Yeah,
expert.
and working in the front lines, doing peer support, mentoring, working in these juveniles and these facilities and doing all these different things across the country. I'm able to see things from a different lens. See them from the 20 different residentials and congregate care and juvenile facilities that I've been in, then also see them from the 5 or so different juveniles and facilities of congregate care that I worked in, then see them from the expert, who've been talking about these things, doing research, educating myself even more. So having 3 different perspectives, and understanding that no, and you grow up, and you can't help but to soak up some of these different things that society has. But really understanding the concept, because I had a worker that used to always say this: there's no such thing as a bad kid. Really understanding that there's no such thing as a bad kid or a bad person. When we really get to the roots of, why people do what they do, there always is an answer,
Mhm.
that we can come back to. And granted, we may not understand all why people do what they do, because in society we have seen some really awful things. But I promise you, when we dive deep into such things, and for an example, I've been really trying to understand the Black and minority culture far as abuse and neglect cases, and how does the fine line between discipline and just appropriate parenting, where did that derive from? And I've been doing a lot of investigating
Mhm.
and research into, like, culture and history, and there's a lot of books and people that are talking about how slavery and the beatings between slavery impacted how we discipline our kids in society and go overboard to where it's abuse and it's neglect, and I ask myself, because we're and I'm not in no way comparison, so nobody get mad at me. How does this look in other cultural groups? You
Mhm.
know, how does the history impact how they treat their kids? You
That's
know,
right.
um, and what does that look like for society if we all have endured trauma in our history? How does that impact the generations, and what does those little droplets do over time? And we're seeing it, we're seeing what it does over time, and I know that's a lot, everybody doesn't have the time to be like, well, this is why, this is that, but reality is, when we make the time, maybe
Mhm.
we can do a little bit more better. Curious what your
Yeah,
thoughts are.
yeah, I so many good pieces there. So I was thinking at the beginning there, right? So attention seeking is attachment seeking, which is I do these behaviors, and if good behavior isn't getting me whatever good behavior is, right? But if that's not getting me what I'm seeking, I will escalate my behavior until it gets me what I'm seeking. And so if I'm a small child and I'm going to school and doing the things that I'm supposed to, but I'm still not getting the attention that I seek at home, I will begin escalating my behavior until I will get attention, even if it's in a
Mhm.
negative way, right? Which I think both of us would look back on our lives and say, yep, okay, check.
Yeah.
Yes, check. Um, and then as I was listening to you talk about how we're just processing history and culture and our own stories and how we came to this, I sort of agree with you on where you're arriving with the slavery, but I would take it even a step further into modern, right? Taking that piece a step further, that how do we keep our Black sons safe? I've listened
Mm.
to Black women in my life say this, is like, I feel like I have to be hard on my sons specifically because I have to prepare them for what the world is going to give them.
Mhm.
That viewpoint, that stance doesn't come from nowhere.
Yeah.
That's real. And so what impact does that have? Now from a white culture, right? Mine's a little bit different because I grew up really differently than maybe a lot of other white people. I grew up in a lot of Black communities with a lot of Black influence, even though I am not Black, I don't identify as Black. And so I saw something really quite different, which was I saw Black families as a thing to aspire to
Mm,
because I saw aunties and grandmas coming together to raise generations of kids that I didn't see in white culture, where white families seemed very isolated from one another. They didn't have the togetherness that I saw in Black culture and Black families. Um, and the many people that came together to raise children, oftentimes. I felt very isolated in that way because it, for me, seemed like I only had this white mother who was who suffered from mental illness, who had drug addiction, and who really by themselves couldn't do that. Right? We did. There
mm,
was no village, so to speak, that was coming around that. But what interestingly happened is that those Black aunts, those Black grandmothers came around me regardless. And as I think about Black history in America, it's very much what was happening in slavery, is that it was the Black women raising white children. It was the Black women coming to rescue those babies, in all the stories that we hear. Now, what is the droplets of that going forward in white culture is I think you see an increase, not of the physical abuse that you're talking about that we
mhm.
see in what's the line of discipline in Black families, but in emotional abuse and neglect.
Yeah.
In that way in white families, and the droplets of not owning emotions, not talking about it, not being able to speak the truth. I think we see that in white culture is that even the pushback about talking about slavery, about talking about Black Lives Matter, that the pushback is we don't talk about these things in white culture. If it's hard, we don't talk about it. And you see those droplets that carry forward, even in my own self when I say I didn't share my own story. Because it's the droplets of we don't talk about that.
Mhm.
We shouldn't talk about physical abuse, sexual abuse. These are mute points that should never be spoken of. And so I think you do see it culturally. Can I speak to other cultures? No, of course not. I can only speak to what I'm seeing in white culture in my experience. But in my experience, I resonate deeply with what you're saying is that these pieces of trauma are carrying forward, and that we do have to call them out into space if we're really going to heal as a society, as a real community, as if we're really going to come together as all humans, to solve this problem, that we have no choice but to call it out and start owning our piece of it.
Definitely. I think back, to being younger. Wasn't always bad times, and a
That's
lot of
right.
people think like, oh, well, you went through this and this, it just must have been awful. Like, granted, there was those you wake up one day and you knew it was gonna be a good day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before I ended up in the system, like, and I
Yeah.
talk about, my mom and my dad were married at some point. Um, there were some really awful days, and then there
Hmm.
was those once in a blue moon good days.
That's right.
Um, and even after my dad left, and a lot of the projection of him leaving and feelings were projected onto me, which stirred the abuse from my mom.
Hmm.
Um, there were still some okay days, and I think back to the atmosphere of being in urban Detroit.
Hmm.
And this is before a lot of the gentrification that has started happening in Detroit, where we're seeing like downtown being uplifted, things didn't get this is where you still saw trash on the street.
Yeah.
you know
Wild
um
animals. Yeah.
yeah. um So one of the biggest things, I was talking with MDHS, HS, and I've been doing a lot of work as far as their reforms and their initiatives with them. And I was explaining to them that throughout these small bursts of happy moments, there's something that I saw that really just stayed with me throughout the depths of time in my experience. And it was the aspect that when something went wrong, the community came together. They put a box of goods together. The older ladies, who more than likely saw themselves, and some of the younger ladies that were single parenting, would watch the kids, and let the parent. It was those little things that I saw that I'm like, if we approach things with families and preservation and prevention, if we approach things as a government agency trying to work with the community from this village standpoint, that it's a collective. We're
Yeah.
trying to be inclusive. We're trying to keep the aspect of community instead of the line of separation. What would that look like? And is that the next level of trauma informed care in the community, far as being informed with parents that may have hardships, because we understand inflation doesn't just hit one side, it's hitting
Yeah.
everybody, you know, um, and stuff like that. We understand that, per our numbers and economic standing with people and equity, that it takes multiple jobs, and when it taking multiple jobs, that means that a lot of people aren't able to go to college, or finish college. That means that, unfortunately, people who have kids, have to spend more time away from their kids to be able to make sure that there's a house, so are we considering that neglect? Are we considering that abuse? If people who are trying to make it, but unfortunately they don't have that family, net, that village, to support them. They can't afford childcare because that's an extra 300. So
Well, it's more than 300. I don't know where you are, but like that's an expensive thing, right? Like, so the interesting thing here for me is when are we going to start asking what the people need
Mhm.
instead of dictating what they need? And when will we address our bias around poverty?
Mm.
Because I think those are two really big questions to consider as you said, what's the next phase? What is this going to evolve into? And if we're really about family preservation, which I hear both sides of the aisle talk about quite a bit, but I'm not
Mhm.
sure I believe either, right? So there's words and there's action.
Yes.
And so for me, if we truly believe in family preservation, we know how much it costs us as a society to remove a child,
Mm.
regardless of why we remove a child. There's a cost. There's the immediate cost of attorneys and court cost and judges, and if we're sending the kid to congregate care or a foster home, the cost of all of that. And then there's the long-term cost of therapy, mental health, all of these things. If they get involved with the juvenile justice system, which we know about 80% of youth removed will, then
Mhm.
it's the long-term cost of housing them in jail or prison, right? So there's all these social costs of foster care as well. And so many people have done the report. We know it's a negative number. For every dollar we spend in child welfare, we lose roughly $9. So on a money concept, people should be invested for that reason. If
Mhm.
you pay taxes, you should care about the issue because you're getting a negative return on investment. That's not good, right? We're all looking for positive returns. On
Mhm.
the just heart of the matter is if that's all true, if we accept that as the truth, that's what all the statistics tell us, then keeping kids and families makes more sense.
Mhm.
So now we have to address poverty. So doesn't it make more sense for me to pay someone's electric bill than to remove their child? Does it make
Mhm.
more sense for me to empower a community to come around a family? Because even if I pay an electric bill, that's not long term, that's short term.
Yeah.
So how do I empower? What does a community need to come around a family struggling within their own community? And how do we empower the community to just take care of that family? And how do we get back to that? Because I think a lot of the ways in which I grew up, obviously in a much different time, Michael, than you, is the community still came around. The
Mm.
community still helped out. To your point, there were still food left on our porch when they knew I wasn't eating. I still got invited to the neighbors to have dinner. Hey, why don't you come have dinner with us, knowing that there was no dinner in my house?
Mm.
Like, that was the community responding to the need, and it was working. When it stopped working was when I was removed from that community I had developed, and now I was left on my own to do it. And what we know is that no state, no government can substitute a family.
No.
That's not its job. That's not its intended purpose.
Mm.
And so then what? Because when do you age out a family? 18, 21. Everyone talked about raising the age. You're 25. Do you not need family anymore? I'm creeping to 50. Do I not need family anymore? That's untrue. You need it your whole life. And so if we're going to continue to remove children, not just from their blood family, from their biological family, but their community is their family as well.
Mhm.
Instead of coming around families, instead of coming around communities saying, what is it you need? Does this community need a childcare facility? What do you need? To me, that's health and human services. That's what health and human services is. That's the definition of health and human services, is that this community might be lacking a childcare facility. This community might be lacking something else. That's where we come in. That's our duty, is to run a childcare facility so that that's accessible to everybody. That burden removes something. Or we run a food pantry here. We run meals here. That's health and human services to me. Health and human services isn't severing the ties to everything and everyone you know, and then somehow thinking a miracle will happen and you will succeed. And then
Definitely.
pointing to people like you, Michael, and people like me, who by very chance and often a lot of luck succeed.
Mhm.
Now, we've also had a lot of hard work, but we've had some luck on our side. We succeed and then saying, see, it works. No, no, I'm still struggling. I would guess
Yeah.
that you still struggle with some of your own stuff. I'm still
Mhm.
struggling. And I'm not a success. I just did it in spite of you, because that's, if it were success, the system wants us to fail because it wants us to move from the foster care system to the criminal justice system. That's what it was designed to do, was to house us. And we spited them. We spited them. And now they want to point to us as a success when really that's not fair and true, because they're successful in all the people that they move from one pipeline to the next pipeline. Um, and that isn't its intended purpose. That is not health and human service in my mind. That's not what its intended purpose is supposed to be. There's my
Definitely.
soapbox.
I love it. I love it. You drop so many gems in there. And one of the biggest things that stood out to me is just this aspect of linear success, and I'm really just stepping away. Like I know it is a word, but kind of just stepping away from that word,
Mhm.
because it starts to give toxic positivity vibes,
That's right.
because everyone thrives in their own right. And just to be transparent with you guys listening, um I've experienced being evicted in like 2018, and from 2018 to 2020, my life has been on, like, I've been doing a lot of advocacy, all these great things and stuff like that, but as far as finding a stable foundation, I do not have that. I work as a transitional house manager amongst 9 other jobs to sustain myself while going to school and still trying to do this advocacy, because I believe this is what God has called upon my life. And granted, I have no worries because of my faith and what I trust that will be taken care of. But granted, if something were to happen with this nonprofit that I'm working under and living with, um, I don't have nothing else. My
Yep.
family relationship is still rocky. And it's almost, I could go stay with family, but the enduring abuse while staying with them. Just as an adult, like that's the reality.
Yes. That,
Homelessness, living in my car, or going to stay with somebody and enduring ridicule and abuse, from things in my past to things in my life now, and what have you. So when we talk about, the needs for family, support and stuff like that, that's not linear either. It's really not like this one. Well, you're 18, you got it. You 25, you got it. Scientifically, it's not even that, because we know
that's
the
right.
trauma behind the brain, and some people being stagnant at certain ages because of their trauma. So why are we thinking that when they get 18 that they're going to be out of impulse brain, when they get 25 that they're going to be out of impulse brain, and what have you, when trauma have stunted them so severely that they may always be an impulse brain? They may be able to reach a certain point of maturity to function as an adult, but impulse brain may be stuck there because they have spent their life within a system that has corrupted them and filled them with trauma. And I think
I just have to nod. I just have to nod, Michael, because you're so, I mean, you're just absolutely so right. I mean, there's nothing I can
Definitely.
add except for yes. Amen. You're exactly correct. Who do we go tell? Like, I just want to take that piece of your segment and be like, this, because it's
Mhm.
everybody. It's listen, I've written a book. I run a business. Like, I have clients, I do things, and I am this far away at any given time to not having
To
any
lose,
of it. And there
to
is
lose it all.
no safety net. That's the thing. There
Mhm.
is no safety net. I'm not going to move in with my parents. I'm not going to, that doesn't exist for me. That will never
Right.
exist for me. I mean, I have a 20-year-old daughter who's never met her grandmother,
Mm.
right? Like, people don't want to talk about the long-term impacts. So all those
Mhm.
grandparents' days at school, yeah, like I had to explain to like my kindergartner why she doesn't have a grandparent coming.
Mhm.
Like, other people are like, it's not just my impact, it's the impact also of everyone attached to me,
Mhm.
right? That relies on me as well. And I hear it with you. It's like, yeah, I got this thing going. Yeah, I'm doing these things. It's really easy to say, look at Michael's working on his doctorate degree. He's amazing. Look at everything he's accomplished. And one little thing can happen and it's all gone in a flash.
Mhm.
And it's something you don't control. You have no say over that nonprofit. What happens if they get
Mhm.
funding, if they don't? And that's what I think people don't understand about the long-term impacts of not just foster care, but of poverty in general, that we don't want to have a reckoning with, is
Yeah.
that we're responsible. That somehow we've deemed it okay for people to fly to space and spend billions of dollars flying to space while people on this earth can't feed themselves and don't have a safety net. And that inequity to me is as unjustifiable.
Yeah. I look at, some of the things that other nations are doing, and they're doing really great strides in the aspect of family preservation, prevention, or keeping people in the
Mhm.
family, but also an aspect of you lose your job, you come back from the war, you not ended up on the street.
That's
You
right.
know, the services help you have your own places. Help you get back on your feet, and it isn't just go wait in this line at Michigan Works, or unemployment, or what have you. It's we're gonna put you into an apartment, we're going to help you, get back on your feet. And also because this experience has been traumatizing, let's get you some mental health support. Now, granted, these are some very developed countries that, have funding and but something that they're doing,
But this
is,
country has funding. This country has funding. And we know it has funding because somehow we had funding during COVID,
yeah, it just came out of nowhere.
right? So that
You know,
funding exists. It's how we're choosing to spend it. But I'll even push you further because I know of countries that if you don't have a job, like if you can't get work, then
Mhm.
there's a job in the state for you. So all state jobs, all government jobs are for those who can't get placed in other positions.
Mm.
Now think about that for a second, because like for
Wow.
most of us, we'd be like, oh, if you have a state or federal job, like that's a lot of security, right? If you have a
Uh-huh.
government job, that's a good job. That's how we would think about it in America. That's a good, steady job. In other countries, they view those as like, these are the jobs for those that we can't place in other positions. So if we can't help you get into the private industry, then you get a state job so that you're still employed, that so you can still work, so you
Wow.
can have that place, so you do have, right? Think about that. But listen, I aged out of care at 18. I'm knocking on the door of 50. I've never had health care.
Mm.
I
Wow.
live in a country where I've never had health care my whole life,
Wow.
like just for a minute, versus just a minimum. Why don't we just have a minimum?
Mm.
Why don't we want people to have a minimum?
The only reason I have health care is because of the 26th sector, because I could not afford to pay.
That's right.
That's the only reason, and I find that to be the reality of most people I know who age out of the system. Who can afford to pay a per diem? Who can
That's right.
afford to go to get mental health services?
That's right.
There's some pills out here that's $90 a pill. So when you say that to me, it strikes a nerve with me, because I'm like, on one end we're telling people to get help,
That's right.
but if this
But
was
we
taken
want to put it
away,
on them like it's their sole responsibility. Don't
yeah,
we have a responsibility as a society to make it available? It's
mm,
one thing to tell people to get help. My daughter's living in London, England right now. She's going to college in London. Like to be a student there, even as an American, right? She had
mhm.
to pay a fee, but the fee, by the way, Michael, was $580, and she has health care for all 4 years that she's there.
See,
For $580 for 4 years, she has access to at least minimum health care. And now when I say health care, by the way, she goes to a therapist, she pays no copay, she gets medication, she sees and talks to her physician on a regular basis for check-ins. They do telehealth, but she has check-ins on a regular basis. Is it perfect? Is the system perfect? No. But she has a minimum. If she wanted better, she could buy better. But guess what? If you say, okay, you need to go see someone, guess what? She can go see someone. That's a
mm,
real piece of advice. If she goes in and you should go see your doctor about this, she can go see a doctor about that. Here, if I say to you, Michael, you should go see someone about that, your first thought is, how will I afford that?
I had to examine my whole life. Got to pull out a chart and talk about budgeting, like,
Yeah,
and weigh pros versus cons. Can I live with this, or do I need to just chop my leg off? You
right.
know.
And let's be honest that if I'm having a mental health condition, am I in a space to then have to think all that through?
Mm,
Or if I've cut my leg off or partially off, or I have a rash or a cold, and I don't know if it's COVID or the flu, or it'll just go away with some NyQuil or Robitussin that I can buy at CVS, versus do I really need to go in and have this looked at? Like
mhm.
I can that's like we have this conversation in my household all the time. Like, okay, should I get a yearly exam this year, or could I wait a second year? Can I do it every other year for a checkup? because we're getting older. So like, should we,
Mm-hmm.
is it important to do it this year? Or could I do it every other? Because the $1,200, should I pay my car down or should I go in for a yearly exam? Like,
And
should
these
I
should not be
eat?
things that you gotta either or with. And I
These,
feel like that has like I feel like and you know, granted, I know there's some very successful people out here who came from this, you know, child welfare experience and what have you. But granted, I feel like that sticks with me now. Like I feel like even as a 25-year-old, I'm working that much harder since I've aged out with virtually, you know, you have your associates, you have your people who are friends in the moment, but you really don't know if they're friends that's gonna be there and thick and thin, you know.
that's
And when you go through different things and stuff like that, and you are trying to make it, it's always that you don't have the coffee pot problem where your coffee pot breaks and you can just go to Walmart and go buy another one. You have problems where you can only put $5 in your gas tank, because if you go anything other than that, you're not gonna be able to afford rent. You know, like, and these are real realities. And I was speaking with some people in California where California costs way too much,
yes.
so people are aging out. Like when we talk about aging out into homeless, people are aging out into homelessness because they can't afford to live in a state that they aged out in.
That's right.
You know, and this is like a crisis predicament, whichever you want to call it, because everything is a crisis. The world is at crisis right now. To be completely, you know, we talk about all these different aspects, you know, from, you know, mental health to community to health, you know, in
Mm-hmm.
general, you know, but there's so many different pots boiling over on the stove, you know.
Well, and I'm gonna bring us right back. I just love your example there. In the book, I talked about when I aged out that I was living in this apartment, but I didn't have any pots or pans. And so I went to Meyer, right? So we're all Michiganders, so we know Meyer.
Mhm.
And I show up at Meyer, and the cheapest pan I can find is $6. And my thought is, I'm going to get this saucepan because I could brown meat in it. I could boil water in it. Like it can do a lot of things with this one pan. And the pan was $6. I had to put that pan on layaway. Now, this will date me. I had to put a $6 pan on layaway and make a weekly payment because I didn't have $6. Like we have to understand poverty to understand changes because so many people don't understand it. Now, I was also like 18. So I didn't think about going to a garage sale. Like there are skills and things that you just
Mhm.
lack because like I need this pan.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, Michael, I was 18. I told you I'm almost 50 now. I just sold that pan at a garage sale, that $6 pan, because not because it was a great pan, Michael, but like it was like letting a piece of that go, right? Letting
Mhm.
that history go. But I was so connected to that damn pan that I just couldn't let it go. But we have to understand poverty in those depths to understand what we really need in communities. Because when people say, just stop watching Netflix, just don't drink a cup of coffee. Um, I couldn't eat until I had the pan. So guess what I had to do? I had to go to Taco Bell and buy 69-cent bean burritos until the time I could get a pan to cook for myself. Like people don't understand that. They just see
Mhm.
people making decisions. Again, they see the behavior. They don't understand what's underneath that headline.
Mhm.
To me, the behavior is a headline. And if you knew the story beneath the headline, you would probably cry. And
Yeah.
that's really how I see it. And so to your point, these pots that are boiling over, the needs are so overwhelming. We're choosing to ignore it. We're
Mhm.
choosing to believe that people want to live in poverty. We convince ourselves of that because we don't want to admit that they need help, that they need assistance, that they need a helping hand. it's easier to say it's their fault. They're making choices. If they made better choices, they wouldn't be in this situation. I want to know how you look at me and say, Shen, you should have not bought that $6 pan,
And
right?
there's some people out
You
there
should
that
have made
will
a
say
better
that.
choice. You
Some
should have made a
people
better choice.
out there that would
You should
really
have gone
say
to
that.
a garage sale and got one for 25 cents. You should have made a better choice. Or that girl that was me that was sitting at MSU's campus needing a job, and the two jobs were to become a stripper or to make minimum wage when stripping pays quadruple the amount that minimum wage pays.
Mhm.
So you can't tell me it's about choice. That's not a choice. Those are people surviving. That's me
Yeah.
surviving, and that's other people surviving. And it's not fair to just say people make bad choices and they have to live in their bad choices. That's untrue. We have greedy people who make money on poverty. Poverty is profitable for some.
Mhm.
There are groups and businesses and systems that make money off the backs of those stuck in the cycle of poverty. And that, in my opinion, is what we really need to begin addressing.
Truly, truly couldn't have said it better myself. Wow. We've touched on so many deep, needed conversations, and that is what this platform is for. I have to acknowledge this. Like I said a prayer before. I say a prayer before I do every episode. And I, um, just ask that that this episode be purposeful, that it be meaningful, that it touch somebody. That someone gets something out of this. And I really hope that you guys that are listening are really able to take heed in this, and even if it's really just a realization for self, just understanding where you're at, where you can be and what have you, whatever it is, I just hope that you're able to reflect. And I always say this, but you know by chance you're listening to this, and you're better off, for whatever reason. Don't let this conversation fall on deaf ears. Take this conversation on, to the next person, to the family conversation, to the dinner table, and have conversation. Truly believe as a community, the more we talk about these different topics and what's happening in the world, we don't know what that's going to strike the next person who's going to be president years later, or whatever's going on. We don't know what may come out of it, but we know we all, by having these conversations, we all become better educated. So that being said, we've touched on so many different things, and I only have a couple more questions for you. And the first one being, what advice would you like to leave here?
Um, that's such a tough question. And so my first response is what would I say to 18-year-old me is kind of what I think when I hear that. And besides the fact that I would tell 18-year-old me to buy Amazon stock, that's my first piece of advice to 18-year-old me. My second piece of advice is almost something I heard you say earlier, which is tune out the others and do you. Don't don't believe it. Don't believe it when you're successful, and don't believe it when you're struggling. And just keep marching, keep doing what fills your heart, and everyone else will figure it out. But you heal you, and you do what your heart is telling you should do.
Definitely, definitely. Um, any last comments? And this really is for a place for you to, share some shameless plugs, how people can follow you. I know you're an author, you're doing great work in this arena of child welfare, so how can people stay connected with you, see what you're doing, follow you or support you?
Appreciate that, Michael. So the book Garbage Bag Suitcase is available in all formats. You can find it on my website, garbagebagsuitcase.com or sheffaloconsulting.com. You can follow on social media. There's tons of free resources on the sheffaloconsulting.com website if you're interested in your own personal development or for systems or organizations that you work in. And you can always email or reach out, and you can support Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm sure they could use a financial donation as well. Supporting other foster kids is supporting me as well.
Definitely. I appreciate that, especially that shameless plug there. Um, One thing I do want to hit before I do my outro is one of the significant things. We touched on so many things, and I hope they all strike you and sticks with you and help you reflect on some things. And I don't know what's going to come out of it, but I just hope it follows with you. One thing that we touched on is in this arena, me, well, let me take a step back. We're looked at, as successful cases, looked at as people who made it, and for those agencies that may be listening to this or what have you, I really hope that if anything you take from that part of the conversation is that to be more inclusive, do not just pick the person who's doing good and their model case, because granted, they can add some things. Do let those people speak on panels, but also get a diverse group of people who are in different stages of that aspect of thriving, because that's
Yes.
what's going to help you reveal the flaws and what needs to change. Granted, I was one of those people that was a model case, but I still said what I needed to say. But everybody isn't a Michael, So please, diversify, and don't be afraid to hear what's going wrong. I think we all can grow from that. I think we all can, get out of this mindset of, well, this person is successful, that person is successful, this person is this, that person is that. We all thrive in our own unique way. And I'm a firm believer. Granted, I would love to be living comfortably, but I also, by my faith, I'm not meant to be comfortable in this world. I'm living to live again, and some people listening may understand that, if you don't. Yeah. But I also, reminisce with something that you said, about being selfish, by not sharing my story. That's something I had to come to a realization too, is that I'm not here for myself.
Mhm.
And I firmly believe that's, no one on this earth is here for themselves. Everyone is connected in some way and shape. When
That's
we
right.
decide to step into our purpose, we don't know who we are able to help or who we are supposed to help. But I do believe a lot of people are falling short of what they are supposed to be doing in this world and going with what they feel they need to do instead of what is needed of them. Um,
Michael, can
but
I add just one thing
go ahead.
to your request for the agencies, which is not only reach out to that diverse population, not just the ones that you see successful, but also pay them for their expertise. Can I
Yeah.
just add that? They deserve to be paid for their expertise. If you want
Mhm.
information from people, because they have information you don't, they have insight that you don't, they deserve to be paid for that expertise and that insight.
Definitely. And with that being said, this has been Resilient Voices and Beyond, episode 23. Um, some things we've mentioned in here may, strike a nerve. Some things can be potentially triggering to some people. If that has happened, please take some time to center yourself before going into anything else, that you have planned for your day or night. Do some mindfulness exercises, some self-care, but also if something has triggered you throughout anything that we have said and it has brought up some memories or some different things that have happened in your past from your lived experience, don't sit in it. My contact information is somewhere tied to my podcast. I'm willing to help you find resources or navigate, pursuing that if that's something that you want to do as far as getting help, or support, even if it's not me, cat, goldfish, associate, friend, whatever, talk to someone about that, and just know that you're not alone. Um, Outside of that, it is cold and flu season, and COVID is still going rampant. Please, we all are part of this big thing called America. That is this huge village. By you taking care of yourself, helps the next person stay healthy. So wear that mask if need be. Carry the little pocket-sized hand sanitizer. Make sure that you wash your hands also. Disinfect, and different things like that. And I do know, if you aren't able to afford masks, hand sanitizer, stuff like that, there's still resources within the community, that you're able to get these things for free. So if you are somehow listening to this and you're homeless and you're trying to stay healthy, there's resources to get masks, to get hand sanitizer, disinfectant spray. If you don't have that in your community, please reach out to me. I'm trying to build Resilient Voices and Beyond. I don't have the backing or sponsorship yet, but I'm hoping I will. But if some reason you're out there on the streets and for whatever reason you're trying to make it, you need something, please contact me. I will do it what's all in my best, my best power to help you, get gloves, get a coat, get some hand sanitizer, get some disinfectant spray, whatever you need, because nobody deserves to be there. I was there at some point, living out on the street, and I want to do my part, to help those individuals, especially it's getting cold out. And this shouldn't be a topic that's just brought up because it's getting cold out, but it's getting cold out. And a lot of people are going to try to stay in abandoned houses or stay in warming centers, and sometimes those warming centers aren't safe. They aren't safe, and what have you. So as you're thinking about what's going on in this season or how to give back or what have you, think about some of the small organizations that does some of this help and does some of these resources. Think about if you enjoy foster care. No push towards, or no bad ill will or what have you towards any of these great big agencies, but think about donating to a small lived experience business. There's a lot of foster youth who have businesses out here. There's a lot of adoptees that have businesses out there. There's a lot of people who've experienced the criminal justice system and are trying to start on that second chance of their life. There's a lot of small Black, indigenous, white, immigrant, businesses that these people need our help more. They're entrepreneurs in their own right, and they're doing something small, which I find, and this is my biased opinion, I find the smaller the business, the more engaged you are with your clients. And unfortunately, that's our society today. But I think those places could use your support during this given holiday, these given season and given holidays and what have you. So, if you do listen to this, and if I can stir you anywhere, but I want to thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for your support. This has been Resilient Voices and Beyond, Season 2, Episode 23, I believe. Hope you guys have a good night, good morning, good whenever you're listening to this. Thank you. Talk to you guys soon.